away with murder.
Oh, okay.
How do you manage this with Twitter? There's no room with under 40 characters to advertise on Twitter.
No idea.
It's not hard to advertise.
Not my job.
You could pay for advertising. I get advertising.
Well, one thing that's good about this company is I know the internet from the standpoint of what I use it for. Like, I want to go show you the property appraiser. I mean, I know how to do a lot of functions, but I'm not a whiz when it comes to that. Fortunately, we have people at the company who are. So, I mean, the combination of people we have here really covers a gamut of knowledge. So if one of us don't have an answer, another one will, which to you is very valuable. Because if Google can't tell you, maybe one of us can.
I got a question. What about if another agent from another company can need to advertise his property, his rental under my name? Is legal?
Did he agree to it?
Yeah.
Did the MLS ad say may advertise? Because on the MLS, there's a place where you can indicate as the listing agent whether other agents or other brokers can advertise.
Well, what happened is, I see, I'll tell you what I saw outside there. They send an email to the broker, the agency, and tell them, do you want me to advertise your property in some, and they say yes. They answer back yes, and we can put it into the apartment.com, we can get the rentals, apartment.com.
Well, see, there's a program called IDC, which is a link into the MLS. Every website, you know, you can go on you've been on a company, you've been on others, you can search properties. And if you look at the very bottom of the advertising, it says courtesy of ABC Realty. In other words, if those listings aren't the company's listing, it has to be acknowledged whose listing it is.
Yes, but some of them, they said that the company, the broker doesn't allow them
Right.
to another
Right.
agent
Right.
or another company.
Right. The reason that we do is we want people to advertise.
Of course.
Because when it sells, nobody knows the selling agent. Selling agent doesn't put a sold sign up. Listing agent does. No one in that community has a clue who sold it. But, I mean, who actually sold it, the selling agency. Listing agent is not the person that normally sells it. It's the one that brings the buyer, which we call the selling agent.
Okay, so in that case, you divide the commission between who brought the buyer and the one that has the listing.
Yes. At the bottom of page 85, actually in the middle of 85, talks about false advertising. I don't think that's going to be too difficult a concept to understand. And that little game we played with phone numbers is the bottom of the page, starting around line 26 through line 3 on the next page. But see, one thing good about having the marketing company, they know how to deal with the placing of stuff in the marketing so that it meets compliance requirements.
that is a good thing about signature, that they are giving you the time on.
Absolutely. When you get your license, because if you pass, as soon as you pass, within,
When
okay, I'm done with that.
we are passing.
You can go in and get a copy of your license. You know, the account you set up, the license will be there. It'll be the size of that big one, and then it'll be wallet size. You want to make sure the wallet size one is in your wallet. Why? Because the public has the right to ask you to see your license. And in a lot of these gated communities, you have to have a picture ID. Some of them will go with the business card, but a majority of them are probably going to want to see the license.
On the license, did you have your picture as well?
On your license.
On
Which
your
license?
card, on the card that.
On the business card?
Yeah,
Yeah,
not the
absolutely.
business, not the business card.
No.
No.
The little card looks very similar to that.
Yeah.
No pictures. I guess they could pull them off of the DMV. Because you have to picture there. Of the ice agent. I'd love to look at some of the pictures. And now that they're allowing you to have the license for a number of years before you have to do it. All right. I just passed the state exam. I am now a licensed agent. I have a company registering me as working with them. So I'm now able to, so I take the test in the morning. By the end of the day, I can be a fully active agent, ready to rock and roll. Yeah? Because I come back from passing the test, you're going to meet with Damien. Damien's going to go through the ICA. You're going to sign it. He's going to go online and dial you into the company. What happens is, the access that we have to whichever company you're going to be licensed with, he has access into. He goes in and there's something that says create a new relationship. What it amounts to is we put your name in Working Gross with your home phone, with your license number. You're good to go. At that point, can you now refer to yourself as a realtor?
No.
Why not?
Because it's not our association.
Oh, because the term realtor is not a license. The term realtor is a trade name belonging to the National Association of Realtors. So until you join the local Realtor Association, which you will also immediately join the state and immediately join the national, because the dues that you pay covers all three of them.
So how can you do that?
What do you mean, how can you do that?
How can you get with the Realtor Association after
You either go to their office or online,
Okay.
and you can actually, apply, pay your money, and be a realtor.
So with them, they handle all the other associations or memberships all at once?
No.
Is that what you're saying?
No.
Do you have to apply separately?
Yeah, but what other associations would you
I
apply?
don't know, you said something about 3.
That's the trade.
How much are the dues?
Hmm?
State, what are the dues every year?
Around. To join.
600 to 700.
Got the holders, or is that NARS in
Yeah.
the state?
Yep.
So every year,
And what about the MLS?
Yeah, but when you sell a house and you make 15 grand off of it, you're not gonna care about paying $600.
And if you're in residential real estate, you can't survive without the Realtor Association and the MLS. They're all together.
So,
And just in the last 6 months, the Realtor Association in Fort Lauderdale merged with Palm Beach County.
so we can survive with residential, but if we wanna go commercial, then we have to do that,
No,
yes. No?
it's just the opposite.
Okay, so then is when we
You
become
find
realtors?
that a lot of the commercial people are not a member of the Realtor Association.
So why do we
Because
need
the
to be
Realtor
members?
Association, if you look at it, for the most part, is geared towards residential. You look at the book. It's, for the most part, geared more towards residential than it is anything else. Even though it's about real estate, a majority of it doesn't directly deal with real estate, it deals with areas.
So
Yes.
do
Did I
we,
hear you correctly saying that you cannot go on the MLS unless you're a realtor?
Right.
Not as a sales agent, you cannot?
Well, you are.
Well, what does the term Realtor mean?
the realtor that you
Membership to
become
the realtor.
member of the association?
It means I'm a member of the Association of Realtors. Doesn't tell you what kind of license I have. Because the license is one thing. The membership in the association is another.
But what do I need the membership for? Yeah,
Uh,
I don't get it.
Because you'd like to stay employed here, number one.
Oh, so it's a requirement?
Yeah, because you can't do business in residential without it.
Oh, okay. So we have to do
It has a ton of training on top of what you get here.
it. When do we? need
They
the
are
membership?
advocates for realtors. They have all kinds of seminars and stuff.
What is the time frame for us to do that? After we get everything here?
How long will it take you to get online or drive to the realtor association?
Okay, so it's, okay, and then we have to pay their $700, $600?
$700.
Well,
Divided quarterly.
can I make one comment here? You do know that you're now a business person, right?
Yeah.
And there's certain things when you start a business
Then you need to invest.
that you need to invest in.
Yeah.
And being a member of the Realtor Association and the MLS is not a point of discussion. It's a point of how quick can you get the money together. So honestly, right now, if you don't have the money, you need to start, get your cookie jar out, start putting money, I'm serious.
Do they allow you to pay quarterly?
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, they want members, so yes, they will work with you. But, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, right now, I'm not a member, but I have administrative access, so I can get into the MLS. And because of my relationship and the fact that I've worked in Boca for 15 years, I know all these people, so if I want to go to a seminar or something, because of what I do here, I have no problem doing it. So we have, Gail, my partner in crime, the other trainer, is a member of the Realtor Association. So we've got every base covered you can think of. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have to take the post-license course before you become a realtor?
No, before your first license expires. I'll make it real simple for you. You're going to be signing up for it sometime in January.
Signing up for the post?
That's for the post. Because you're going to finish this class the end of, and then you're going to pass it. And then in January, we start a 45-hour course because of March. Now, that won't mean anything to you, because this, you're not licensed as can be expiring March of next year. But the sooner you get that out of the way, the better. Plus, it's an excellent little course.
How much is that course?
Same as this one?
1,500? Very good.
With the bands.
Actually, it's cheaper.
Do we
The
ever
books
take a
don't
test?
cost as much.
Is that a test at the end of that course?
Yes,
Oh, there is?
yes,
Another test?
yes.
But not state.
Not a state test,
I get a
Class
it's
question.
a class test.
I got a question. When we pass all the exam and everything, did we have a class to how to work it, how to navigate in the MLS?
Yeah,
Or Matrix?
the MLS does.
Or Matrix? Oh,
The
we
MLS
have
does.
to go to them, okay.
At a certain point, we have to delegate, and because they've got people that do that day in and day out.
Yeah.
But we do bring in one of the trainers once a month for an hour and a half into the training room here, and basically she'll deal with any topic that you have a question on. I mean, the room should be packed, it drives me nuts. Because constantly, I don't know how to use my MLS. Why don't you get your up?
It was
The
because.
board has it, if you're in the Boca area, it's right at Potomac and military. They have training there all the time. Palm Beach Garden, no, I'm sorry. It's right near the corner of Okeechobee and, something like, yeah. It's right in that area there, so, for people that are this way. But from right here in this area, the closest one would be on Potomac and military. Okay. The reason I was asking you about that, on page 86, there are two little paragraphs where they talk about it. It also shows that you can get fined for using it if you're not. Then I want to back up a paragraph. Internet sites. It was interesting to see the department and FREC and everybody scrambling when the use of the internet started to really gain ground in the real estate business. Because they had no parameters for what requirements you will have when you operate on the internet. Well, I mean, a stupid question. When a potential buyer or seller goes to our site, would they need to know that they're going to a real estate company site? Same difference as if they were going to pick up the Sun Sentinel and there's a whole page ad. It has to indicate on there somewhere that this is a real estate company. What they talk about in the internet is everywhere that you ask for contact information in your website, the name of the company has to be near that spot. So it's a reminder to them that if they're going to give their phone number or email or whatever it may be,
They're gonna contact you.
they are not contacting the owner of the property, they are contacting an agent. Now, we have a gentleman, part of IT, who actually puts together the websites, and they will do a website for you, which is good because he has a lot of experience with it. And, you know, to me, if I'm new in the business, I'm not sure what I should have in there. And, or what the most effective layout, you know, which one, I mean, you see a zillion ones, which ones are ones that seem to draw people. Well, you're dealing with someone who does that, it makes a difference. Yes?
Is the website they make up for you a fringe of the company's website? Or is it independent from the company's website?
No, I think it's independent from the company.
So you should go out and get your own, go on GoDaddy or...
Yeah. Yeah, you can,
Do we
if
need
you
that?
if you're gonna do that, you're gonna need to make sure that the company approves of your website.
Okay, so we have our own hosting of
Yeah.
services.
And it would be a good idea to host through yourself, not the company, because the company wouldn't have a volume discount. But you would as a single person.
No.
That is, to me, one of the biggest reasons why I would go with the company.
Yeah, exactly.
Is because the hosting is gonna be cheap.
Cheaper, yeah. So we pay the portion of our own hosting that is
Yeah.
linked to the.
You can't get everything for free.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You know, every once in a while we have, but it's cheap.
It's cheaper,
Okay, page 87. Let's do this. Starting with line 1 on 87. Top of page 87, line 1, to the bottom of the page. Bracket. And then turn the page, including the little figure at the top, where it gives a column for Florida and a column for federal, bracket to the bottom of the page.
What are we, on page 88?
Bracket, whole page. Now, this is this famous do not call list.
I am in the.
Hmm? 87 and 88. You don't do cold calls until you check to make sure those calls are not on the do not call list. We got the federal government breathing down our butt because one of the agents did it. And you'll notice fines are $10,000 per occurrence in Florida and $16,000 in federal.
Is that really an effective sales tool?
Huh? What?
Cold
Calling?
calling on the telephone?
In today's world, no, because of the do not call list. But you can spend money buying a do not call list. A list that has been scrubbed on the do not call list.
Fine, but even then, are you gonna, is that an effective way of soliciting
In
business?
today's world, I would say no.
No.
Right.
I used to work as a telemarketer doing that. And it was effective like 15, 16 years ago.
I have a question for you. Anybody tell me the most effective prospecting?
Word of mouth.
Yeah.
What I asked you to do the first night that you have yet to do.
Build a list.
And that list constantly does what?
Referrals.
And every once in a while it goes down. Why? Unfortunately, we have people that expire. If they're on my list, I hope they're not on my list anymore, because that means I'm with them.
Yeah, but then you could sell their company.
Yeah, this is true. Well, I got an extra seat here. It's on sale this week. But seriously, talking about prospecting, your mouth is a great tool. Your displays are great tools. If I ask you to go home and take out all the clothes that have a logo, like a horse, how much of your closet would be emptied out?
I don't use any of them.
How many of you would have a lot more room if you took all, and I'm just talking about the horse, I'm talking about any of them. Nike, the symbol for Nike.
Oh, yeah. I don't like those.
But you wouldn't wear a shirt like this. People say, I don't like those name badges, they look tacky. Okay, so why don't you be a secret agent? Nobody knows you're in the business. But the first night, I gave you the secret to success in this business. Some of you have been told to totally ignore me. That's okay. That's okay. I'll just fill up another classroom,
Can we use
and all the ones
these?
that don't, we'll throw you out.
Do you
You
guys,
don't mention
do
it.
you guys have pins? that you
Yes,
can-
ma'am. And
But
that
not
we
all
also
of
can
these.
get them bedazzled for you. I never knew what that word meant. That's all, when they put all the stones around them. Yeah, I got 8 of those. Now, I have them for sale by owner. Can I call a for sale by owner? Because there's the sign on the yard with their telephone number.
Yes.
Absolutely not.
So how can you communicate with him?
No,
Key in the door? No kidding.
You ask.
You can't call them, but you can knock on their door.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has.
Because it says telephone solicitation, if you look at your
If you
notes.
call them, it's under soliciting.
Yeah.
Oh my
You gotta
God.
be face to face like a person.
But you have to be careful. You're in a subdivision and there's a sign at the entrance that says what? No solicitation. Which means you're not gonna be knocking on any doors. By the way, if some agents will go in communities where they can do it, they'll do flyers that you got them so that you can hook them on the door. They have it cut out so it'll fit on the knob.
Or a business card, I guess.
But
You can use and leave a note.
She said leave a note.
leave a note. Well, you know what? If I put one of those hanging things, I am leaving a note.
I want your
Of
home.
course.
Yeah.
So here in Florida,
I've seen it
If I stop for a second, I can't
Yes,
hear.
people. A lot of people live in gated communities.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my husband brought a whole bunch of those door things with us. How we getting in the community to advertise?
You're not.
No, you're not supposed to.
No, you can get in.
Like once
You
they sit
gotta
around,
find out
yeah.
who you know or who you know who knows somewhere in there. That's how you use your sphere of influence.
you didn't do the mail.
But you don't have one yet, because I don't know, cause why. But
Yes.
that's how agents get in. They get in by using their spheres
Can you send
for
out
somebody
mail?
that knows, lives in that community,
But can you put
and
stuff
they get,
can you put, if you get in the community, are you allowed to put stuff on their doors?
I would say most of the gated communities, answer be no.
Can you send out mailers?
The mail.
Yeah, you can tell that mailers.
Don't you get them all the time?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't check my mail. I get my bills virtually.
Our estate agent, going to get in there.
For what?
Without spending anything, that's what I'm asking you, if I do speak the
Well,
license.
I tell you what, I'll let you answer your own question.
Well, I think somehow we'll get by. I said, I'm going to.
And that guard probably won't have a job very long. If they found out that that he or she let you in to run around.
How about if I give her an address, I'm going to get address.
Are you going to that address?
They call the ad.
Yes or no? We're not gonna play that game
No.
tonight. Yes or no?
Play the game.
You're not, yeah,
No.
yeah you are, because that can get you kicked out of that community permanently. Because basically what you did in your illustration was sneak in.
Yes. I'm about to evict you.
Well, that's called trespassing. It's a great
I
idea,
can picture they walking on the.
but if there's no solicitation,
But
you're
where's
gonna
the
find that the
sign?
security guards are gonna be escorting you to the front gate.
The The signs are, when you pull in, you know how they have like a swivel thing usually with like the palm trees and the waterfalls and all that stuff? But
Yeah,
usually
some-
there's like a little no soliciting. It's sometimes even this big. But the fact that they have it on their property, you're trespassing, they will arrest you. If a homeowner wants to press charges, you're going to jail.
Dale?
Especially if they pull out $1 million and give it to the cops.
I see.
$1 billion?
Trust me,
I want to
it's true
pull
both
up
have
the
money.
cops and I'll rescue you and give you part of it.
Yeah, but once they press charges on a lawyer,
I'm not quite sure how long it'll be before he's.
I don't know. I work in homes every day.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, a live situation that happened that I was involved with. Someone legitimately gained entrance to a community, saw whoever they were, and then used that opportunity to try to knock on other doors. My patient, who was always suffered from anxiety, heard someone banging on our door. She wasn't expecting anyone, so she called the cops. And that person, because they were hanging it on our door, and she leaves her door open because she is a fall risk, so if something happened, like myself or one of the other advocates can come in, and the nurse, they accosted the person in the building giving out, and they got in trouble for doing that.
All right, let's go back to the telephone solicitation. The robocalls are also a violation. I don't know about you, but I seem to pick up again. And then all of a sudden they'll die out because what happens is the government comes in and does what? Shuts the place down. And it takes them a few months to find another location and get cranked up again.
So what happened in the sign is their email address. Am I allowed to send an email?
Yeah.
Unless they ask them to
On 87, lines 18 and 19, that first sentence, it says Florida's telemarketing law is administered through the Department of Agricultural and Consumer Services. I don't get the agricultural part. Well, what they did is they combined two agencies into one. And notice also in that paragraph, if you violated, the charge, the penalty is $10,000.
Do we
Per call.
do highlight that?
Now, well, the first sentence is the start.
What page again?
87,
18.
18 and 19.
highlight
Sorry.
The start there?
Yes,
Okay.
lines 18 and 19. Full stop. 18 step. Under state law, it says that once a for sale by owner advertises the fact that they are for sale by owner, you're allowed to solicit them by phone call. You can't call just randomly, you would have to call them. Federal law says that the only time you can telephone a for sale by owner is if you're calling on behalf of a buyer. You can't use that buyer as a pawn to get you into that house to negotiate for the listing. And you have to make it clear to them that you want to come to their home because you have a buyer who is interested. You cannot make any attempt to list the property. You can request that they compensate you if the buyer purchases the property. It's called a commission agreement. Another reason why we probably give them the non-representative disclosure.
Do we need to do that verbally in the call right there, or
Do what?
the commission agreement
Yeah,
verbally?
yeah, because from the car, I'm gonna do a signature request and
Okay,
send it to them, and they're gonna sign it and send it right back.
okay.
And then, the buyer and I will drive up and look at their house. Welcome to the 21st century.
Okay, fine. So, and then you
In
have.
olden times, you'd had to go knock on the door, praying that your buyer doesn't get there first,
Okay.
and you'd have to type out
Everything.
a
I-
agreement to commission. You'd have to take it over and get them to sign it. Then you'd have to go try to find your buyer. Today, I can do all of that run around in 30 seconds. Because if they agree to pay me a commission, and they have internet access, I'm gonna send them out of the app files a commission agreement. They're gonna sign it, I'm gonna sign it, I'm gonna send them a copy back. I obviously have a copy in my app file. And we're ready to roll. By the end of the day, I got the property sold.
Okay.
Welcome to the 21st century. But however, if you're not good at using those kind of tools, you had best get therapy. Because the next generations of buyers are not going to wait around for you. And do me a favor, I don't care if you print it out, the contract out, please don't handwrite your contracts. You're not a third grader. Besides the fact, third graders couldn't write it out anyhow. They haven't learned how to write it. Why?
They can print.
Yeah, this was their writing.
Correct too.
They don't need to write.
What if you're dealing with another people, a person?
Yeah?
that you can't-
You mean that 85-year-old I saw in Macy's signing the little box? But old people won't do that. Well, I guess if I'm selling shoes, buying shoes, I'll do just about anything. And then you get to their house and they won't sign online. Yet they just came from Macy's signing online. So that excuse is getting old. Besides the fact, I know people 70, 80 years old that are whistles on the computer. Why? Because they've had nothing else to do. It's become their hobby. And they're telling you what you're doing wrong. And you're supposed, when I'm 24, I'm supposed to be the whiz kid when it comes to
I taught my grandparents how to play Xbox.
yeah.
I'm serious, my grandfather plays Call of Duty all the time. He's good.
He's about to beat you now.
He does, I'm serious, because all he does is play it, so.
If you look at the bottom of page 87, you see the 3 bullets at the bottom of the page?
Yeah.
It starts out, the federal law provides
Provides.
the following exceptions.
What line is that? The last 3 bullets. On the 87 page.
Yeah, on page 87. It starts in the middle of line 29.
Got it.
What do you want us to do with it?
I like.
Read it. Oh, read it. I'm sorry, you can't do that.
It's all right. I put notes in, so I'll go home and do it. I left my book at my job.
I left my food at home today.
Really?
Yeah. That's okay, I got a chance to see my grandson because my wife wanted over.
Yeah, I was in the shop and I was studying at lunch, and then I rushed out because I wanted to be out and stuff like that.
How important is it to maintain communication with people in your sphere? Because if I don't, I'm going to lose the right to pick up the phone and call. And by the way, if you're contacting these people, I love it if you're texting and you're emailing. But I also want you to pick up the phone and talk to them. Because it's a lot more personal. And that'll make you different. Because if you call your sellers once a week for a 5-minute phone call, just to touch base with them, they'll probably fall out of the shoes. Because today they don't do that. They may send an email, they may say a text, but to actually pick up the phone and talk to the person, I think in today's world, will be to your advantage. And I'm not talking about age.
Well, sometimes they like it, sometimes they don't.
But I also can tell how to communicate with them on how they communicate with me. They send me a text, they're not looking at that point for me to do what? Pick up the phone. Unless the text told me, call me. They send me an email, unless they indicate otherwise, or the situation necessitates a phone call. Because a lot of times, with this app file system, anytime they make changes in the file that I have to review, I get an email from the file. I click on that link, and it takes me to the file, and then I can take a look. But sometimes it's easy enough just to type a couple sentences of what it is they need to do to correct the problem. But sometimes it's something that I need to discuss with them. And that's too much writing for me. I mean, you can do it, it's just too much writing for me. I can call them in 3 minutes, tell them it would take me an hour to type out. But you don't want to lose the right to be able to make that phone call. So you need to communicate. 1 second. You need to get your list together because you're hitting the time of year where you need to put together your business plan for next year. What are you going to do next year in this business? Well, I want to make sure that everybody in my sphere knows that they have an obligation to me. At least 2 referrals. So if you got 3 people in your sphere, the odds of you getting business, if you've got 1,000 people in your sphere, the chances of doing business are good. The chances of making a serious amount of money are even gooder. But if you haven't done that, somebody else will earn that money. Because that person's going to sell or that person's going to buy this year. You don't know who, you may not know who that is yet. Some of you do know. But that's today. The world changes very quickly here. And nobody moves in and out of Florida.
Well,
Yes.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
The first one, when I'm developing a business relationship with my customer, does Ben require you to keep track in writing of the communication that you're having with that customer in terms of, to kind of avoid misunderstandings?
Now, listen to my answer to her. Now, you want to keep all those records.
Yeah, that is what I thought. Okay.
But those records also belong to the company.
Yeah. But it's good to have.
But see, in the app file, everything that comes into that app file and everything that goes out is in what they call that activity log in the middle of the page. No, call that file. I don't know what matrix is.
My second question.
But this is a document management system, so there's a zillion type of those.
My second question, can I, out of my money, buy gift cards for restaurants?
Who are you giving them to?
To people that refer me clients? Like for example,
Well,
my
no, you have to give me an example. I'm already having palpitations over here.
No, the thing is, for example, in the car business, in the car business, because I'm coming from the car business.
Well, this is the car business.
No, I know, but that's why I wanna know, you can give like an invitation if they refer.
Not even a teddy bar.
Okay.
When you start working,
Wait,
I want you to go over to the Citrus Village over on Lyons. I want you to go talk to Bob Solomon, because I helped him get his license 30 years ago. And the one thing he remembered for class is not even a candy bar every time he sees me. Because that's a phraseology I used to use to get that point across. It doesn't matter. Even if it's a candy bar, you can't do it. Does that mean agents don't?
So you can't thank.
No, that's like saying you're not supposed to speed, but people speed. But I also have the philosophy that you better be careful with monkey see, monkey do. And a mom would be real happy if you came home and said, well, everybody else is going. Your mom may have your head. Or you are a mom and you've had heads for saying something like that.
But we can ask.
But then, of course, your response to that as mom is, if your friends jumped off the roof, would you jump off too?
Depends how high.
Then, if you're smart, you back off and shut your mouth. I found that sometimes I forgot to do that.
Yeah, that was my whole childhood. My dad stopped saying anything on ice. I just got impacted.
He just
Like,
did
all
it.
right, okay, I get it.
So how, if you're thanking the customer,
I was thinking just.
how is that wrong? Explain it to me.
Because they're being compensated for sending me business.
But agents do that all the time, they have a housewarming gift for.
The buyer or seller. And
No, that's
in
different.
61J 10.029, paragraph 2 says that the parties to the transactions can be compensated if full disclosure is given to all parties. So that homeowner, you know, that gift that you give them, and agents do it all the time. But they're compensating the buyer or seller to a transaction. They're not paying somebody for sending them a lead.
Exactly, that's why I was.
And that's what she was talking about. She's not talking about giving a gift to the buyer or seller after closing.
Yeah,
That's very
exactly.
common, and that's totally legal.
Yeah.
Now, if 2 weeks later that person sent me a referral, I can send them a nice thank you,
That's it.
but I can't compensate them. Because in that situation, they are not a party to the transaction. They're not the buyer or the seller.
Good one, thanks.
Anybody else?
What if you're an agent in another state? And what if there's an agent in another state, let's say Massachusetts, and I refer someone to him
Right.
in Massachusetts?
Right.
Can I get compensated for that?
Do you have a license?
No.
If you have a license, yes.
Yeah, if you have a license.
Watch. Any kind of compensation question you want to ask me about, if it's somebody from Mars, if you have a license, the answer is yes. If you don't have a license, the answer is no. Is it now pretty clear? I don't want any more of them questions. Because all you're trying to do is turn it around. Bottom line is, license, they get paid. No license, they don't. And I probably shouldn't use the word paid. It should be the word compensation.
No loopholes.
Yeah, no loopholes. Although, yeah, there are. We had 2 pages of them. They were the exceptions to the rules of having a real estate license. So if I send someone, if I'm in an apartment complex and I refer somebody in, the why? Because that's an exemption under 475. But generally speaking, no ticket, no washing. Got a license, you can be compensated. What can you be compensated? Just about anything that's legal. Probably couldn't give them, you know, a fresh bag of marijuana. Although they may be very happy, right?
That's how you know you're from the hood, man.
Are you kidding? As a kid in the '60s,
Used to go wild.
yeah. I had a friend, he grew it in the cornfield. Because the stalks were so high. And I went over, I came back from school one weekend and I went over to see him, because I hadn't seen him in ages. And we walked out back on the back porch, and up against there were stalks, about, probably about that high. About 7 or 8 of them. Am I right?
Good stuff.
I probably bush hogged down millions of dollars. Because I had no clue what it was. I never even saw it until I went to college.
You smelled it before you went to college.
I don't actually, I don't ever remember smoking. No, wait a minute. I graduated high school in '70.
What about moonshine? You know about moonshine?
Moonshining? I knew about moonshine.
You walked out
The
back.
stories of
Yeah, it was
my
like, here's
family.
some-
But I hadn't tasted moonshine until I got to college.
I think I speak for many people, let's move on.
We will. As soon as I'm ready.
Wow, that's crazy. Everything was like, get away with anything in the '60s. I'm in the wrong era.
No, I know in college, it was very common to have the DEA come rolling in there, knock on somebody's door.
That's crazy.
Apparently, the school that I went to was part of the drug network. On page 88, line 14 talks about email advertising. If you're doing email advertising, even if it's just communicating with your sphere, you have to put an opt-out clause in that email, which says what? If you don't want to receive, unsubscribe, anything to indicate that you're off the hook.
So you have to do it before.
No,
Before you become a real estate agent, I mean,
no.
then I will be one, and then keep the, you give your friends.
I have an idea. We're doing a brokers open on Tuesday. So Monday afternoon, late, we're gonna send faxes to all the community, all the real estate offices and agents in that area, inviting them to our brokers open. A broker open means that you're having an open house, not for the public, but for agents, typically done during the week. The typical open house for the public is usually Saturdays and Sundays.
Do they do a lot of broker opens
No.
here? No.
Communicated communities.
Sure.
So, in this area, you have so many gated areas that the open house is very difficult. Although you can be creative enough, you can get the security to work with you. I know some agents that have, I don't mean that in a negative way. But they had to have a list of the people that were the agents that were gonna come in. As long as they had the list, and obviously the agent had to identify themselves. But that fax blast, they call it, is illegal. Unless you have the permission of the person or company that you're sending the fax blast to. Which is why you won't see any fax blast. And a lot of the emails today, systems send it to a computer. I get faxes all the time, but they're not faxes. They don't come out of the fax machine. They come in on your computer and either save it or print it or both. I remember when we had fax machines, they were a nightmare. Because if you're familiar with them, every time you sent the fax, the pre-printed part of the document would start fading away. So from a standpoint of compliance, it was like that. So I was very happy to see that tool disappear. All right, 90, please. Starting with line 90 through page 90 through page 96. Deals with escrow. Those pages are extremely important. I'm going to give you a few stars, but this is another area like the agency stuff that we talked about. Because escrow money is whose money? Somebody else. And the state of Florida does not like the way too many people handle other people's money. So they have some definite rules. And this is one of my responsibilities, is to make sure that every file has an escrow verification signed by the escrow agent. Now, that's not always applicable, because in rental, we don't have escrow accounts. We only have escrow accounts for sale. And the company doesn't have the escrow. So a lot of the stuff you're going to be learning here is when the company has their own escrow account, which majority of companies today are deviating away from that. Caldwell Banker. If you were a buyer working with Caldwell Banker, you gave them an escrow, they're going to put it in Sunbelt Title. Working for us, you get a buyer with an offer, a check, that money goes into Signature Title Group. You will see when you get to looking at the contracts and stuff, the first page of the contract, it's required by law that you indicate who the escrow agent is. In other words, so everybody who has any interest in that documentation would know who was holding on to the money. So that puts certain responsibilities on you to do what with that money? Take care of it. And do what with it?
Keep it safe until the deal is closed.
I'm going to give it to someone else. Because the last thing I want to be walking around with is escrow money. Your first star, if you go back to page 90, please. Is lines 15 through 21. Where it says immediately defined. As a sales associate, when should you turn the money in?
When you sign the contract.
Immediately.
No later than the next day.
Immediately. As a broker, when should I put that money in escrow? Immediately. That's what it says there. However, immediately for you is different than immediately for the broker. Define immediately for a sales associate or broker associate.
first day
And
of
business
the
The end of the next business day. So if I got a check on a weekend and a contract, when do I have to get it into the office?
Monday.
By law. Now, tell me what immediately means for the broker. As the broker, I have 3 business days to do what?
To put in escrow?
Put it in escrow. You're working with the buyer over a weekend, buyer wants to make an offer. He gives you $1,000 deposit check. So you receive the check on Sunday. When do you turn it in to the office?
Monday.
By?
The end of the day.
The end of what day?
Business.
Business day or calendar day? Business day. So that means 5 p.m.
Yes.
So the second question is, given that scenario, when does the broker have to have it in the escrow account?
By the third business, the end of the third business day.
By Thursday until
All
Wednesday.
right, let's vote. We know it's not Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's Thursday.
Is it, how many of you say it's Wednesday?
Wednesday.
How many of you say Thursday? Define immediately for me, for the broker again.
End of the third business day.
So it would be Wednesday after this.
The end of the
No,
business.
You haven't given me a complete definition.
3 business days.
It's the end of the third day, but it's the first.
Third day from when?
Wait, you interrupted me. The first day is, in this case, Monday when the associate has it due, so it's Monday, Tuesday,
No later
Wednesday,
than the
Thursday.
end of the third business day after their sales associate has received
Yeah, so
it.
that's when the.
If you receive it on Sunday.
Wednesday by 5 p.m.
No.
The broker received it on Monday.
No, because, yes.
No, the broker didn't receive it on Monday. The agent turned it in on Monday. The broker received it on Sunday
Yeah.
because you are a representative of the broker.
Got it.
So when they put it in your hand, it's as if you put it in the broker's hand.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
It's a business.
Right, because this would be day 1. Because you never count the day they got it. Because it's 3 business days from the initial receipt. And understand the initial receipt is gonna be you, not Ben. You know, you're not gonna call up Ben and say, Ben, I got a check, come here and get it. 2, 3.
5 p.m.
Okay, since you said the initial, what if it was given
So
to
the
the
minute-
associate on Monday? So it would be that.
Well, wait a minute. Watch, real simple. If you said the initial receipt was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay, that's what I thought.
All right, how about this? The initial deposit was given Thursday,
So
Friday,
Monday,
Saturday, Sunday,
Monday.
Monday at 5 p.m.
Yes.
Do you count weekends if it's
Business,
business?
no.
Saturday?
No, because it's business day.
Exactly, so it's.
If I get it.
So I don't count. I don't count. So it would, you're right, it would be, I did that wrong. It would be Friday, Monday, Tuesday. Because you don't count. It's a little different with the way the contract is set up with time. Contract functions off of calendar days, whereas this escrow feeds off of business days, for obvious reasons.
If I get it Monday morning at 8:30 a.m., can I give it to my broker at 9 a.m.?
You can give it to them at 8 a.m.
So it's just.
You can give it to them anytime after you get it.
Yeah, alright, so 3 days is like.
Yeah. But that's why we're not gonna do all this shit to start with. We're gonna have it wired to the escrow account.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
And then have the escrow account, and the escrow agent do what? Send us a written verification that they have the money, and we put that in the app file, and everybody's happy. And you never had to touch dynamite.
That's what we do.
This is the most lethal stuff that you deal with in this business, other than your relationships with the public. Yes, ma'am.
On the bottom, it says, sales associate must deposit to broker by the end of the first day of 3 business days. Then the broker must deposit it by the end of the day.
Yeah.
So that,
What that is saying is that this is day one of the day that it has to be in there, so the agent has to give it.
first day.
And then the broker got second, third. So potentially, we're looking at the broker reality only having 2 days. Because if the associate waits to the end of this business day to turn it in, the associate hasn't done anything wrong. But that was day one of the 3 days. Because the original receipt was here, so this is day one. So whether you give it to them at 9 o'clock or you give it to them at 5, you've turned it in within the business day. But in reality, the broker's only got 2 more days.
Has it ever happened where a sales person gets the check and they're flying out tomorrow and they put it like in a delivery thing to get to the broker so that, okay. Like an Uber driver or a specific career?
Next day.
A delivery person.
Everybody listen. What I'm about to tell you has 2 parts. And it's extremely important that your ears work. When you put money with an attorney or a title company, the rules are pretty much the same. You still have to give it to the broker, and the broker has to get it to the escrow agent by the end of the 3rd business day. Because if we're going to be using Signature Title as our escrow agent, then we don't have an escrow account. So it wouldn't be the broker depositing the escrow check. It would be the broker getting the check to the title company by those 3 business days. And why I am nuts over making sure that we have written verification in that file that whoever the escrow agent is has given us something in black and white that says we have the money. Because then the money's not our problem. Because you could have all kinds of issues with escrow. Especially when one side wants to give it back and the other side doesn't.
How close are we as an industry to getting it totally electronic that no one touches the check?
We're probably halfway there. And rapidly.
Yeah, very
Heading, yeah. It's fine with me.
Oh, yeah.
But the danger here is hackers.
Is what?
Hackers. You listen to me. If you're doing business and you see Yahoo, AOL, or Gmail, and you're doing something for your real estate business through one of those avenues, I'm gonna beat you to the inch of your life. That cost this company $10,000 because the wiring instructions were sent by email by an agent through AOL to the other title company. Because money needs to be transferred from that company to Signature, or vice versa. We were transferring it to the other title company. What happened is some hacker intercepted the email, changed a few things, sent it through, and the money was put into bogus account someplace. $10,000. And that was thanks to agents who don't follow directions. You want to play around personally on your AOL and all that, that's great. I don't want to see you. You send me, once you're licensed with us, and you sending me stuff about business, and you send it with your personal, we've been told by Ben to reject the email. See, that's the unfortunate part of what you just said about we're heading that direction. So we have to learn to be, the way you help, you protect everybody there is, you call the person, the company, whoever you send it to, the instructions, and you ask them to read back the instructions. Then if a number or a word or whatever has been changed, and you do, in the subject area of the email, you don't want to put like escrow instructions, because they're looking for those key words to hack in on those emails.
I have used in the past the e-consent of entering a platform of the company where whatever money I wanted to transfer, they send me information to that platform. So is that the same thing?
Yeah. Yep. If you have the buyer and you've got escrow money, that money has been put into Signature Title's escrow account. Then if it needs to be returned because the deal didn't fly, if it needs to be transferred to the closing agent, wherever it needs to go, there are instructions for how to do it.
And can it go directly from the buyer side to the seller's?
I'll give you a perfect example of what. My daughter tried for 2 years to sell her house, and all of a sudden there was a buyer. Now there was a scramble. Why? They didn't have a place to go. They got 4 kids. And the only place that might work is guess whose house? So, fortunately, that same day, you know how sometimes things just go together? A house in Boca Falls that they liked that model, came available. I did the contract on the kitchen counter. Wrote up the contract on the kitchen counter, and they signed it. They were there. I sent a signature request to New York, or New York or Washington, one or two, and had them sign. And within 45 minutes, we had a fully executed contract.
What did someone buy with cash?
Mm-hmm.
What did someone buy with cash?
Right. Well, here's the deal. If they're going to hand you a bag of cash, and in Florida that does happen, we better find out if the title company will accept it.
Where is that money coming from?
Yeah.
You will have to fill out a city, large currency.
But you know what? There are people that legitimately have the cash. Because of the nature of the type of business they had, they get paid in cash. And of course, naturally, they identify all that money when it comes to tax time and pay their fair share. Now, Let me explain to you, once you start working here, how we're gonna do this escrow thing. I expect you, for this reason, every office we have has that neat little machine that you can scan the check through and have it go into the account. So there's no excuse for you not turning that check in the day you get it. Unless you get it at 5 or 6 o'clock at night when all the offices are closed. But if you get that check during the business day, I expect you to turn it in. And then, for example, Rachel, which is she's the receptionist here, she collects it here. But what she does is, she sends it to accounting, which is one door down, and then she sends me a copy of, I actually get an upload from the title company for the escrow, saying that, they've received it. So by the end of the day, I should have verification in the file that that money's there. Whether you wired it, or whether you had a check and you turned the check in. Cash, you got a problem with it. Because the odds are, they want to verify that money. And the odds are they don't want to have to take the time to verify that money. Obviously, the most favorite way for transferring the funds like that is wiring. But fortunately or unfortunately, we've got an issue we have to deal with. But I'm serious, people. You do your business on the company account. You can do all your personal stuff on how many other emails that you have. Unless you'd like to be responsible for a company having to come up with $10,000 to replace an escrow.
So, are you saying a wireless can go just through and is no verification necessary?
The verification is the account number.
I mean, cash deposit in another country, Brazil as a sample, I'm from Brazil. And the deposit cash there and wire to here, to the United States of America, to buy a house. They have to prove where the money comes from in Brazil?
Yes. The bank is
To
gonna
be
ask.
clear.
The bank is gonna ask.
The bank is gonna ask.
And if it's more than $10,000, it has to be reported to the federal government.
Or the suspicious.
That's why a lot of stockbrokers went down for offshore accounts.
I don't quite understand
People,
what you said.
listen to me very carefully. Remember, we're an agent now. We're not a buyer or seller. Escrow money needs to be in escrow. And it needs to be in escrow now. Because it says in 475 immediately. And then it gives a definition. The point that they're making with defining it the way they do is they want you to put it in the bank immediately. But they're giving you until to be able to do that. So they don't really want the broker to wait till Wednesday to deposit it. They want the broker to deposit it Monday morning. Well, because history says we can't trust you. And if you'd like to hear some of the war stories of escrow, one of these days we can sit down and chit chat. Probably good to chime. But you have to understand that the things you're required to do today are not your fault. It's your predecessor and how they handle business.
A legitimate situation here. A person coming into a private jet around the United States of America with $500,000 cash in his pocket. I'm coming to the bank and I want to deposit $500,000. I heard that I used to be a cop driver in Boca Raton. So he said, where's the money coming from? I didn't see he asked the question. He lives in leisure jeans on Andrews Boulevard. we deposit $500,000 in the bank, you know, and that was it. So how?
No,
is
that wasn't
report-
it. You didn't see the rest of what it was.
Okay,
Because
what's
if
the
it's
rest of-
10,000 or more,
They do background
it has
check.
to be reported to the federal government.
So the
And
bank,
given the nature of where the country it may have come from, and the fact that it's coming to Florida on a private jet,
Laundry,
Yes.
platform, or something
You know,
like that.
unfortunately, that smells.
And if you're done in Brickell.
Because if you've got that money, why the heck do you need the plane for? Why can't you wire it?
And I don't think they would put it in America.
I don't know where they would put it, but when they put it in your hand, you better damn straight make sure it's an escrow. I don't care where they got it from. It's not our responsibility to deal with where he got it from.
Maybe he sold a house there and he's bringing the money.
You know what? I don't care.
Yeah, but you just have to explain the bank.
I don't have to explain nothing to the bank.
No, the person.
You're the person. But wait a minute. Again, I'm not getting you to think like an agent. You're still thinking like a buyer or a seller.
Yeah.
That's not your money. So I don't know whether it's legit or not, but I'm gonna put it in the escrow account. And then, let the government or whatever figure out what they wanna do with it. I don't want it in your hands. Cause nothing good come of you having escrow money in your hands. Nothing. But I can give you a whole list of things that can go wrong. I gave you one with screwing up the wiring instructions. And you know what? It was the agent's fault. Because they didn't use, you can't use these AOLs and the Gmails and the Yahoo for business. Show me how many businesses that you know of that that's their main email. None. Why? Because they don't want to get hacked and lose hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions. Yes.
I have a question. So, if the buyer give me a cash and tell me that I want to do the deposit in cash, what do I need to do with this money?
First thing I would do before I took it, pick up the phone and ask the title company, I've got $10,000 in cash that my buyer wants to put down as the earnest money deposit.
And what happens if the title company tell me that we're not going to accept this money?
Then I've got to go somewhere
Where?
called a bank
Okay.
and get
Cashier's
cashier's check.
Cashier check. Okay. So, but I need to do that, or the buyer needs to do
Well, actually, the buyer needs to do it.
Buyer.
But unfortunately, sometimes you may have to hold hands to help them.
Yeah.
They're coming from another country. This is the first time they've ever been here.
Yeah.
So, I may need to babysit. I'm not gonna tell them what to do, but I know that, see, that's the title company's gonna say. It has to be converted. But again, that's why we like the wiring. We just have to be careful how we use that system. Because then, guess what, then nobody touches it. If it's more than 10,000, they'll report it to the government and it'll take care of it. Why 10,000? Because for whatever reason, that seems to be a magical number to say, ooh, it may be something bad.
And what happens if it's 9,999?
Yeah, as long as it's less than 10,000.
It's less than 10,000.
The suspicious activity report.
But the other, she brought up the other side of the coin is, you're 1 penny off of 10,000.
If they do multiple deposits in the same day or in different branches, you're still triggering off a SAR, suspicious activity report. And one of the biggest reasons you shouldn't really take cash, you should let the client come. What if there's a counterfeit bill in it, and when you get to the bank holds on to those bills? You're accountable to the buyer for that deposit that they put down, because he's gonna say, I didn't give you the counterfeit bill. So why take the risk?
The check is payable to them.
Well, the bottom line is, if they want to give me cash, I'm not going to accept it.
Yeah, don't touch it.
They can go to the bank on their own, or I'll go with them if necessary. But I'm not going to touch that money. I don't touch that money, I ain't got a problem. All right.
No stars?
Yeah, that immediately defined on 90 was the start.
That's it?
Well, so far. I still got more pages. Let's go to page 92. Starting with line 7, it talks about acceptable depositories. I don't think what you'll see in that list would be too surprising.
To 12?
Well, yeah, that whole paragraph.
To start?
No. What's the key word in that paragraph?
Accept.
Interest? No,
Responsibility?
What?
Responsibility?
Florida.
okay.
You have to have the money in Florida. You can't put it in your Cayman account. Don't laugh. We've had workers who have transferred funds to offshore accounts and went offshore with it. $1.5 million. And I kind of followed it for about 5-10 years.
Where is he now?
I don't know. Like I said, I followed it, and that's been like maybe 10 years ago. So, and I've never heard what happened. But you know what? I got $5 million. I can do a lot of hiding. Unless I get greedy and overspend. When it comes to the escrow account, who's responsible for the escrow account?
The broker.
Broker's responsible for everything. The escrow account has to be reconciled every month. Imagine the person that would have to do that for this company. Headache, it's way beyond headache.
Just one person?
Well, there's no persons because we don't have an escrow account.
Oh, yeah.
I think by the time I get through all this, you'll understand why we don't have an escrow account. I was very happy when I first came here and Ben said we don't use escrow account, we put it with the title company. I was very happy to hear that. Because 2/3 of all this mess we're talking about here is not going to come into play. But if we had an escrow account, Ben would have to be a signatory on the account. However, he could have someone from accounting also be able to sign the checks. Now, we know the danger of that. And I get 6 million stories on that one. The broker had a bookkeeper who, when the checks were cut, she would obviously cut the checks, and he would sign them. And then she changed the name to hers and deposited. Eventually, her and the son walked off with $250,000.
Wow.
But I think they were called a few months later. So obviously, someone that you entrust that part of your business to, you really have to checks and balances there. You see more and more reasons why you would like to be a broker. Now, what we have to do as far as handling the escrow money is slightly different because we're with the title company. On page 92, starting with line 20 through the end of the page, which is 48. You'll see there's 3 bullets. We pre-populate our sales contracts because of that first bullet. Because if we're making an offer, we have to put the name of whoever the escrow agent is going to be. Yes?
If the escrow funds are held by the title company here, they don't have to be the title company that's closing?
No.
Okay.
One has nothing to do with the other. Does that happen a lot? Yeah. We'd like to be able to do that, but no. Because it's norm in Palm Beach County that the seller chooses the closing agent. So if we don't have the listing, although I have some of the agents that have asked to use signature title, and you know, you have companies that don't have the affiliated businesses, don't have title companies, and if they've done business again with signature again, a lot of times they will recommend to their seller to go ahead and use. So even in that situation, we wind up getting both sides, which is good.
So if they put it into signature and they transfer it to Joe Brown's company, does, in the final escrow, does signature get something for that responsibility for a couple of days? No. Wow.
That's incorporated into their fees that they charge for doing title work. See, by holding escrow and being available to you to deal with, you know, title issues or ownership issues, and they're expecting in return that when your opportunity presents itself, you use them as the closing agent. But no, they do not charge a fee for the escrow account.
If it goes in and goes out, but if it stays there, they do the title work?
No, they may not do the title work, but we got a closing 40 days from now. Probably around 10 days before closing, the other company's gonna ask for the escrow money, and then the money won't be sent over. I want signature to hold on to that escrow money as long as possible, because if this deal blows up, it's gonna be a whole lot easier to deal with getting the signature, because of what we're about to talk about. But let me touch again on what it says there about the title companies and attorneys. Number one, the title companies and the attorneys don't have to follow the guidelines of 475 when it comes to escrow. Because you're going to see in a little while that there's a specific procedure you have to follow if there's a conflicting demands for the deposit. Now, question. You have a contract signed by the buyer and a $5,000 earnest money deposit. At that point, who controls that money? You have it in your head as the associate. You have it on a contract offer signed by the buyer, and you have that $5,000 check. At that point, who controls that check?
The broker.
Broker never controls it. It's not the broker's money.
The sales.
It's not the sales associate's money.
The title.
It is not the title company's money.
It is. Right?
Whose money is it?
The
Buyers.
But you have.
Because we don't have a contract yet, we just have an offer. And until there's a fully executed contract, the buyer can ask for the return of their money.
So why?
Now, they're probably gonna wait 10 days to get the money. If it's a check. Wire funds, different story. But there's still a processing time to release that money, because you understand that the escrow agent has to document everything that comes in, everything that goes up, and it better match up, or you can have some serious issues. You'll notice in those two paragraphs, it talks about, well, I'm sorry, I didn't finish. I now have a fully executed contract. Now who controls the money?
Yes, the title. The brokers until they send it.
Broker is holding the money in escrow. Escrow means it's whose money? Somebody else's. They're not controlling it, they're safeguarding it.
Yeah.
So I have a fully executed contract. Who controls that money at that time? Both buyer and seller. Because if this deal falls apart, or the buyer decides during the inspection period to walk away, I only need the seller's signature, a buyer's signature on the cancellation and release. I need both signatures for the release of the money.
So who's gonna keep that money safe until they?
The escrow agent.
Okay,
That's why I'm glad we're not the escrow agent. Because when all this mess starts, we're not responsible for fixing it.
But that's why I said the escrow. It was on the escrow?
No. The escrow is simply a bank account. It's not somebody that has any authority. When you first take the offer, it's under the control of the buyer until the seller accepts that offer. And now you have a fully executed contract. At that point, for that money to be taken out of there, it either has to be by instruction of the closing agent or by the buyer and seller. But you realize that means that if this deal falls apart and the seller's blaming the buyer and the buyer's blaming the seller, and this buyer doesn't want to give back the money, the seller says the buyer, the broker, the seller has no right to any of that money. And unfortunately, the monkey in the middle, us, have a problem. Even though we're not legally obligated to fix it because we're not the title company, we're still in that mess. We still got 2 irate people or more to deal with. So from a business perspective, it's not over. From a legal perspective, it's not Brooke, Ben, and our responsibility to resolve it. Whatever we do to help resolve it is for business purposes, not for legal obligation.
If the contract is fully executed, then it will go to the escrow title company.
It's going to go to them before. What I ask is, who controls the money?
Okay.
I put the deposit in the day I got it. The second day, they're still negotiating, and the buyer says, you know what? It isn't worth it. Give me the cancellation and release. All they have to do is sign the cancellation and release. Because the seller, since they don't have a contract, has no right to challenge it. They don't need the seller's signature. They only need the buyer's signature. Once we have a fully executed contract, now we got another problem. Now the problem, we still have we had a problem to start with. This problem is a whole lot bigger. If the broker is holding the escrow, there are specific requirements that we're going to look at after break regarding what the broker has to do to resolve the dispute. Now, you'll notice that the second and third bullet where it talks about the title company, it talks about 10 days. You have an obligation no later than 10 days from when you deposit that money with the title company to get written verification that they have the money. You then have an obligation within 10 days to get a copy to the other side of the transaction. Because they have the right to know that money's there, just as much as your side. Because we have a fully executed contract, they basically at this point have equal rights to that money. Hopefully it'll stay that way, and we get to closing, and everybody gets the money, and everybody gets their deed, and everybody goes home. I have a check. But at this point, I'm still a long ways off. So like I said, the rules are different. Now, when it comes to conflicting demands, the title company can basically say to the buyer and seller, listen guys, when you work this out and you sign the release, we'll cut the check. Other than that, have a nice day. Because it's at their discretion. And you know that as an attorney, when you deal with money, you're very careful to turn loose money that's not yours. Unless who it may belong to have agreed that this is where the money's going. No attorney's going to turn that money loose. Even though they have a lot of freedom to decide, if they make the wrong decision, they can potentially get disbarred. Because if you make the wrong decision and you give the money to the wrong person, you're guilty of conversion. Conversion is not a good word. Conversion translates to no license. Number one reason people get in trouble with their license is handling escrow money. I looked up agent the other day from another company because we were having such a problem with her. He's already on probation for potential bank fraud. You can see all that, what all the wonderful real estate agents have done, and you'll understand why the law is what it is when you see what some of these people do. You wouldn't ever even think of doing some of the stuff that you see there. It's very interesting, for lack of a better word. Okay, let's take a break. We'll come back and
You don't mind? Thank you. 30%. You panic when it's like.
Well, she doesn't know how to get home. Yeah, that's right. Do you want to go outside?
Yes.
Okay.
Like so.
you earn your money here. You earn that. Very good.
Paz. ¿Cómo te digo con la...
Allá van a apreciar mucho
Acá.
aquí también yo voy a sacar.
Aquí el mercado es... Country Club.
Allá, más
Sí.
puede que casi no tan completos, pero si te vas a la
Puede ser. Compro departamento en la zona africana.
y es que, o sea, yo pienso que yo voy a ir donde a la posibilidad de la manera.
No vengan ni para acá. Para acá.
Pero me da la impresión que es una buena plataforma. Y voy mirando cómo me va yendo. Yo tengo un barrio de piedra que tengo un barrio de estoy trabajando de consultora en una compañía de trading que se llama Educa Trading, que es española. Nosotros vendemos paquetes de entrenamiento de la compañía. Oracle, dependiendo de lo que ellos necesiten, hay necesitan un entrenamiento en software, nosotros facilitamos los personas que saben de eso y paquete para el departamento de recursos humanos, para el desarrollo para el desarrollo de trabajo, hacemos de todo, yo hago consultoría. Fuera de eso estoy lanzando una compañía de la empresa, tengo toda la manufactura aquí en el la compañía de entonces estoy abriendo un branch. Entonces necesito consultoría. Sí, en uniformes de todo tipo. Por ejemplo, yo le voy a ofrecer a Remes unas eso es un negocio familiar. Soy consultora y voy a hacer eso. Entonces todo eso es la casa. Pero ¿qué hacía? Trabajé vendiendo más gratis a carromeros y en verdad, un año y medio. En Denver me acaba de mudar para casa. Yo he vivido en California 11 años, 4 años en Miami, 7 años y medio antes, y ahora estoy
Yo en Miami, Nueva York, México, Bogotá.
tengo 6 niños, hermanos, tengo 8 hermanos allá. Viviera profesor del año, de la sociedad, de maestros de después se fue a vivir a León de Guanajuato. Ah, no, pero después estuvimos corriendo en Monterrey. Y ahora tiene una mueblería. Pero porque ya...
Mueblería mexicana.
No, yo no soy no vende muebles, pero muebles mexicanos.
Pero importa. Claro. Se agarró ahí alguno.
Y mi otro hermano de México.
Oh my God.
Porque es que México es una cuna
Sí, pero yo le digo una cosa. Dentro de las escuelas buenas, por la parte de la chilena, la brasileña, de Latinoamérica, está la Lozana. Lozana está muy bien.
como la Universidad de Buenos Aires.
Sí.
En Chile también, pero mi hermano no se mucho por donde sabía su casa. Entonces tengo dos hermanos, mi hermano mayor que está, lleva ya 30 y...
Ese es el de la muerte, que muere. Y el otro. Pero eran 3 hermanos.
Bueno, claro, tengo dos hermanas también, pero
Una
la verdad es que mi familia está muy bien allá. Yo fui la única que Pues sí, pero como ya me casé con un gringo, ahí estoy. Pero ya
Sounds sexier than
colombiano.
like Anthony
Mira.
were going.
Que
Well, yeah, but that's a little bit of a twist. He's actually got a little bit of
Sí.
kind of interesting. I don't like
excelente
Todo
persona,
chao.
pero la parte
colombiano lo conocí allá.
no, sí.
Llegamos.
I can't make that comment because I don't want to listen.
Have some more.
I'm gonna watch my
Voy a seguir rentando el próximo año.
Espérate que te la licencia.
Por eso, ¿sabes lo que un año más? Por lo menos.
Pero lo
No, the way if I tried to do it, I would not have been able to.
Obvio. Pero sí, pero esta compañía no.
That's why you guys speak Portuguese.
From Portugal.
It's like how Mexicans and Puerto Ricans.
You know what? So my husband is free. There's a lot of good things these days. I might be
Let me see if I can get it.
It's not even a budget. We made ours. Force feeding. Trader Joe's. No, I swear, I'm actually I made you have to cook it pretty much. It's not crispy. I was everything. Yes. Oh my God. Where does she make it? On holidays right now. But she made zucchini.
Okay, guys. On page 93, you've got 4 different paragraphs here. The first paragraph talks about interest-bearing escrow account.
I think I want to buy it.
Everybody signed in? If you're gonna have an interest-bearing escrow account, whose permission would you have to have? Both parties. Would it have to be in writing?
Yes.
You don't even need to look down to wonder if it deals with money, if it needs to be in writing. I would hope that you wouldn't need to study that kind of stuff.
Are they actually doing interest-bearing accounts now?
Of the interest-bearing accounts I've known of, most of them were set up where the broker kept the interest.
And they're allowed to do that?
As long as the parties agree to it in writing. It's rare for one reason. Number one, a lot of the escrow amounts are not large numbers. Number two, they're in there for a relatively short period of ton. So the amount of money, right now, the amount of money that they would generate wouldn't cost wouldn't cover the cost of maintaining the file, or the account, so. No, it's not gonna be covered. The second paragraph talks about record keeping. How long do you have to keep the records?
5 years.
5 years.
5 years.
IRS is 7.
You're correct.
5 years.
But everything 5 years.
Yeah. Basically, if in here they ask you in regard to a real estate company, how long you have to hold something, I'd answer 5 years. In other words, if I'm guessing and I don't have a clue what the answer is, 5 years will probably work. Now, when we talk about the money in the escrow account, that's someone else's money. I can't use it without their permission. Now, back up in time a little bit here. Initially, when I first started, if you had your operating account with a bank or a savings association, they would hold your escrow for free. No maintenance charges or monthly fees. But as time has gone on, they charge you fees to walk in the door. Forget about your escrow account. Now, that created a major problem, because what was happening is the banks, every month, were pulling out the fees out of the escrow account, which means the banks were stealing escrow money. But, are you ready for this? It wasn't the bank's fault. It was the broker's fault. Because the state said the broker should have made the bank aware of the fact that they cannot withdraw those funds. That's where the third paragraph came from. Because they realized they had to allow the broker to put at least some of their own money in there to cover the cost that may be associated with the escrow account. So what's the most the broker can have in a sales escrow account of their own money? 5,000 is not the right answer. 1,000. If it's a property management account,
5,000.
then it's 5,000.
If it's a developer,
Is the developer a broker?
no, but let's say somebody bought a house from a developer and they ask for the 5% of the property value.
Who often asks for it?
The developer is asking the buyer to put 5% of the property value. Once they
In escrow?
they come, yeah.
Okay.
Is that the norm?
No.
You can put less, 3%?
Whatever you negotiate.
Okay.
When I built my house, I made 5 deposits because I didn't want to give them any of more of my money than I could help. So I strung them along as long as I could.
Okay.
And pays to know people. So that means every month you have to account for all those escrow accounts. So if you've got 100 active contracts with money in escrow,
100,000.
I said I have 100 transactions,
Yeah.
averaging 100,000. That's a hell of a lot of money. So you can understand why I'm very happy that Dan decided having an escrow account was a bad idea. But then, yeah, they also have to account for $1,000. Now, let's go back and let's assume that the escrow account is interest bearing. And the parties agree, every transaction agrees that the broker gets to keep the interest. Well, that means at some point, the personal money of the broker are gonna exceed $1,000. They immediately have to withdraw it as an overage out of the account to bring it back down to a maximum of 1,000. You see why having an escrow account, how much beneficial it is to your life. Like ulcers, heart attacks, strokes. And all you gotta do is turn the damn thing in and get out of the way. Make sure it's verified in your account. And that's all Ben's gotta do too. Because like I said, legally speaking, we have no obligation to deal with a deal that falls apart in regard to getting the money back. Does that mean we won't be involved in it? Of course we're going to be involved in it, because we're involved in it from a business perspective, not because we're legally required. In just a little bit, you'll see what this conflicting demand stuff we talked about looks like when the broker is actually holding the escrow. It totally changes. Bottom of the page, misappropriation of funds. That doesn't sound good just in its name. The number one reason that people get in trouble used to be conversion, the unauthorized use of escrow money, or someone else's property, like the afternoon delights that they decided to use in their listing. Yes, you heard what I said. I have a bunch of other stories too. Interesting things happen in this business when there's a vacant house. I had one agent walked in one day, closed the lockbox, opened the lockbox, knocks on the door. Anybody here? Well, there was somebody here. They were in the shower with the music on. And they didn't hear the music. And as they're walking into the living room, that person come walking out of the bedroom with the birthday suit on. Can you imagine having to deal with? That's a mouth. The others, I won't even tell you about. But it's, you think, oh yeah, right. But I heard that same story from 4 or 5 different agents that didn't know each other. So when 4 or 5 agents tell you about it that don't know each other, don't work with the same company, you know darn well that that was probably the true situation. The number one reason people get in trouble is failure to account and deliver. In other words, it's Tuesday morning, you forgot to turn in the check on Monday. From my perspective, your life is in jeopardy. I had an agent one day, not long ago, didn't lose the check. She said, I got the check here, there was an issue situation going on. Should I put the check in escrow? And I look at it, and it's dated for 7 days. She's had this check for 7 days.
Oh my God. Only because it had.
It was all I could do to restrain myself. Because she just got the company in deep doo-doo. I said to her, if this ever happens again, you will not be working here. You're lucky I'm giving you a second chance. That's how serious this issue with escrow agents. You know, people kind of slough it off and say it's a big deal.
So what happens?
What happens?
Yeah.
You have a job, that's what happens. And we might even turn you into the state. And given the fact that it's the number one reason people lose a license, you might be staring at suspension or revocation. Would you like me to continue?
No.
But you understand their point. I'm so particular about getting that escrow money in the day you get it, and written verification in your file from the escrow agent, all you gotta do is ask. They understand the urgency of it too. But, you know, they're dealing with a whole bunch of deals. They may accidentally overlook yours, so I need to follow up. I don't need to get mad, I need to follow up. And we forget sometimes our deal's not the only one they're working on. But it's the only one I care about. If it's my deal, the other 800 that they're dealing with is not my problem. So I kind of have to understand. Well, and that's a good thing. If everybody's still using the title company, it means they must do, for the most part, a really good job, or the number of agents using them wouldn't go down, or wouldn't go up, it would go down. The biggest problem with the title company is you forgetting to tell them they're doing closing, and you call them up 10 days before closing and say, are you guys ready to close? We're closing next Thursday. And of course their response is what? What closing? Nobody has told me that you were having a closing. So, you know, but the nice thing about it is they'll still probably get it closed. And they have an obligation to us. They may not necessarily push that hard for an agent from another company, but they're going to push that hard for us. Because they're part of the game.
So what does the title company get out of it? And they
The
charge
fees
you
that they charge, the fees that they charge,
Who do they charge?
no, not the insurance, because they can't charge any more than the promulgated rate.
The buyer.
So it's not where they make their money. They make their money in the fees and stuff they charge. They also make their money is they do different things. For example, if someone wants to convert their ownership to a life estate, you would send them to the title company, because the title company does something like that. When we get to the estates chapter, I'll have several examples of how that comes into play. I think you'll find it very interesting. All right, let's go to the next page.
So there's nothing for us to do in 93?
Nope. Bottom page 94. It says notice of settlement and notice and settlement procedures. If you have a conflicting demand over deposit between the parties, the broker has 15 business days to notify FREC that they've got conflicting demands.
That they got one?
Conflicting demands over deposit. In other words, the deals fell apart. The buyer's blaming the seller's blaming the buyer. The seller wants the money, wants to keep the money, the buyer wants it back. We've got a problem. First person we call is mom. And let mom know what? We have a problem. And within 30 days of the notice of the conflict, you have to begin one of the procedures here to resolve it. So it isn't you got 30 days, 15 days to tell them you got a problem, and then 30 days to start working on it. You have a total of 30 days. So if it takes you 10 days to get that notice to them, you only have 20 more days to begin. Now, that was on lines 10 through 18. Now, under 475, there are 4 specific resolution procedures available to me. The first one, I think, on the list at the bottom of the page is mediation. The second one, which I think is the top of the next page, is arbitration. The third one is litigation. And the fourth one, escrow disbursement order. What's the difference between mediation and arbitration?
Trying to resolve
of it amongst you? Mediation
Mediation isn't binding, arbitration is.
Mediation.
Right, mediation is not binding. If you sit down with a mediator, the mediator will look at both sides and listen to their argument and evidence. And then the mediator will recommend the resolution. But the parties are not bound to it. If they go the route of arbitration, arbitration is binding. If you're into sports, you know that. Because if a sports person goes to arbitration because they don't feel they're being given a fair amount of money, whatever the arbitrator decides is what they wind up getting paid.
I don't understand why someone would go for mediation when it's not binding and not go straight to arbitration.
Because FREC would prefer that you, as an agent, get the parties to sit down and try to work this out civilly.
And if that doesn't work, do you get more time?
No, you don't have to resolve it within 30 days. You have to begin the resolution process. Important to understand that. They're not saying that by the end of 30 days you have to have it fixed. This may be months, this could be years. Yes?
I have a good example. I purchased a condo several years ago, and the day before I was supposed to go to closing, I got a call from the bank to say that they were not going to closing because they found that there was hazardous waste in a canal behind the condo. So I called up and I said, listen, this is not a deal. I'm not getting a mortgage and I don't want to live there. It took me 6 months to get my money back because both the buyer and both brokers wanted my money. But I think the 6 months was worth it. I did get the money back eventually. But we started with arbitration and so forth and so on until we got it resolved. And under those circumstances, I believe it wasn't disclosed to me, and I have a feeling they knew about it. So they really, they just wanted to hold on to my money. They felt they worked for it.
Wow. Well, I can understand that from the agent's perspective.
I got it. I understand it.
And it wasn't the agent's fault.
It was brokers.
But if you
Now,
have,
the question is, did the agent know about it?
It was on a survey. That's how the bank found out about it. It was not
On the disclosure statement?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, then that means the buyer knew it.
No, the buyer didn't know it. I didn't know.
Well,
No, it wasn't on the disclosure. It wasn't on the disclosure.
oh, it wasn't on the.
No.
The seller must have known.
but if you had like a financing contingency and that would immediately get you out of the deal anyways, even if it was the day before closing that the bank.
You're absolutely correct. It gets you out of the deal. It doesn't necessarily get you the money. Why? Because the person who probably is not entitled to it, the seller in this illustration, refuses to sign that cancellation release, the escrow agent's not going to cut the check. And that's when the war begins.
That's exactly
And you go back and forth, whatever methods you use, until finally somebody gives in. Yes.
But wouldn't she get her money back because as a contingency in the contract, you always write in person's...
The contingency in the contract, first and foremost, is to allow her to walk away from the contract.
Right.
Getting the money back is a different story. And because of the potential liability of giving it to the wrong person, your escrow agents don't want to turn that loose unless they both sign. I will tell you this much. Greg Geffen, the attorney for our title company, has actually met with the side that's refusing to sign and discussed with them the legalities of what they're doing, and he's been successful quite a few times in getting them, after that meeting, to release the funds. because we're really in a very precarious position. There's not really much we can do at that point, because we don't have the authority to do it. Now, the third way is litigation. And you'll notice under litigation, there's two terms. What are they? Interpleader. Okay. The first one, interpleader. The root word, plead. If I file as the escrow agent, I file in the courts, probably with my attorney, for an interpleader, what I'm doing is I'm asking the courts to take these lunatics off my hands and figure out who's entitled to this money. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I am begging you to take these fools. The declared judgment is this: I want you to take these fools, but I want my money. Judgment. Money. So, two things. Just take them so I can go home. Or, all right, you figure out who's entitled to it, but I'm going to stay and get my part of that money once it's over. Which one do you think most brokers at that point would do? Get up and go home. And then the third choice is an escrow disbursement order. Who do we get that from? Nope. FREC. FREC. Actually, we don't get it. Let me ask you this question. Let's assume that escrow disbursement order is what we're going to use to resolve this. So I tell you, the associate, to fill out the form. It's about 6 pages. And make sure you attach all the documents they tell you you need. Sign the request, send it off. You know what's going to happen when it gets there? It's going to get sent back. Because you have no authority as the sales associate to do this or notify FREC. You don't exist. I keep trying to tell you that. It's not your responsibility. It is the broker's responsibility. I've done quite a few of these. There's so much fun. And probably looking at 4 to 6 months before you get a response back, depending on how backlog. Because what happens is when you send all that stuff up, one of the attorneys for the Division of Real Estate or the department will review the file. They will then make recommendations to the Florida Real Estate Commission at their meeting as to what they should do with the money. So let's assume that the broker gets a letter back from the state, from FREC, saying, we recommend that you give the money back to the buyer. So you give the money back to the buyer. You notify both of them. You get a phone call from an attorney representing the seller. The attorney says, if we don't get half that money, we're suing you. Because we don't agree with FREC's interpretation. So you wind up in court. And the judge agrees with the seller. And awards the seller $30,000 plus court costs and attorney's fees. So you did what FREC told you to, and now it's cost you $30,000. Somehow that doesn't feel fair. I did what they told me to do, and now it's cost me a bundle of money. I'll let you stew on that until next time. We're not going anywhere yet.
Oh man, I thought you...
Don't think. I can leave it yourself in charge.
Yeah, a little rush there.
Yeah.
I'm just joking. This is like 5th period all over again.
Yep. All right, I'm just looking. Oh, on 95. End of line 24 through line 26, it says, FREC rules require a broker to notify the commission within 10 business days if the dispute is settled between the parties or if the matter goes to court before the EDO is issued. Which means, translate in plain English, if I get this fixed before mom tells me what to do, I have to tell her, don't bother. Because in reality, they don't want you to do the escrow disbursement. Why? Because really, it's not their problem. The only reason we get all these guidelines is because your predecessors didn't do anything. They just lollygagged around and didn't take care of the problem. So, mom comes up with, if you have this problem, here's your options. Pick one. If that one don't work, pick another one. But we really, that's why you notice the last one is who? Mom. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it in that order, but I think there's a hidden message there. So far, tell me what you found good about holding escrow. I didn't think so.
Even being a broker.
Yeah, being a broker is not looking so good either.
I don't even want to be a broker anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, you what?
Well, just think about this. If you opened up an office as a broker and hired all the people in the room, you get to deal with them on a daily basis.
So from what you're telling me, why would anyone go with an escrow company if they can actually go with a title company?
Well, most of the companies do.
Is there a scenario where someone would choose escrow over title?
Maybe if they were a small
reason?
company, a one-man office, one-person office, it was just them. But you know what, then that becomes a hassle. If I'm doing any business at all as a sole proprietor, doesn't make much sense. I can't give you a percentage saying, you know, X percentage of companies today don't have escrow accounts. Because there are still some out there that do, reasonable size. I just couldn't see the business logic of dealing with that, especially with every month you have to reconcile. And watch this. Let's say the broker forgets to sign one of the reconciliations. And an investigator comes in to do a routine inspection. And asks to see the monthly reconciliations for the last year. And one of those, he didn't sign. It's a $300 fine. Imagine if it's not right. If they'll fine you for $300 just because you forgot to sign your name on 1 out of 12, which means if you didn't sign it on all 12, that's 12 times 300. That's probably going to require you to go to a course on escrow. There is courses out there on handling escrow accounts, reconciling escrow accounts, which a lot of brokers are sent to when they come in and investigate and find out their escrow accounts all screwed up. 5 years ago, second year I was here, we had an agent come in from DV, came to the Pembroke Pines office. She was located in Miami. Now, she just came in for routine. It wasn't because somebody filed a complaint or anything. And we spent 3 hours with her, Phil and I. And guess who did most of the talking? I did. Ben was there because he had to be by law. I was there because I had to be because he said so. So, and we spent a lot of, and the big thing with them was compliance. Escrow. We were there for 3 hours. If we had an escrow account, we'd have been there for 3 days. Because they're going to go through the whole thing. Well, you know, once we were finished, you know, a little chit-chat time. And she talked about the fact that there was a directive that came down from the department that they wanted the investigators to do routine inspections of offices, not to look for something, but to look at what they're doing where they may not be in compliance with what the law requires. and to give them some guidance to do such, which I thought was a pretty cool thing. And there was one company she was working with, their escrow account was off by $2 million. She says, I've been there 5 times because I don't want to file a complaint against them. But they couldn't figure out where the $2 million was.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about 50 cents here, we were talking about some serious money. In the past, guess what? They'd be revoked now.
FREC came
Came in there. I don't know. She said that there was this, you know, obviously as an investigator, you've seen escrow accounts, you've seen how people, you know, shoveled it out illegally. She said, we couldn't find any, said that they couldn't find anything to show it. And there was no activity that, you know, nobody that had access to the escrow account was running off.
So then if they sued them.
Well, I don't know what happened. This was 5 years ago. But at that point, she was still trying to help them figure out what was going on.
That would be madly for you.
The point being with those illustrations is this is not something you mess around with. Because the documentation, there has to be what they call a paper trail. Where it came from and where it went and where it's going to go. Bottom of the page. The 4 settlement procedures that the broker has the option to use do not apply to certain situations. This is the 3 exceptions to the notice and settlement procedures at the bottom of the page. The first one talks about HUD. You know that HUD takes over FHA foreclosed properties. If you're purchasing, if your customer is purchasing a property through those HUD foreclosures, and a conflicting demand comes up, HUD has its own procedures for handling it that override 475. That's the bottom of the page there. The second one is on the top of the next page.
96?
Yes. Lines 1 through 5, which is note 2. Yeah, number 2 is the start. At the top of page 96.
Did you gave any part on page 95?
Nothing. Nothing.
Page 96. What's the licensee?
Huh?
Talk about licensee.
Licensee is somebody who owns it.
Oh.
That's what you call
When you get
a
your
licensee.
license, you're a licensee.
Now, licensee could refer to a barber, because barbers are licensed under the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. But obviously the word license here, unless you're talking otherwise, is talking about a real estate licensee, because this is a real estate licensee. Because I've had people ask me, how do I know they were talking about a real estate licensee? And my response was, you do know what class you're in, right? This is not weaving 101. Most of you, a lot of you may be familiar with number 2. Under the Condominium Act, the buyer has 3 business days to review the docs. Anytime during those 3 business days, the buyer can put written notice to the seller or the seller's agent that they are choosing to withdraw. That's saying that there won't be a conflict. If it's telling you right there who's entitled to the money. The buyer. The key is, does the buyer put the seller on written notice within those 3 business days? The third one, which does not have a star, it says if a buyer of a real property in good faith fails to satisfy the terms specified in the financing clause of a contract for sale and purchase, the licensee may return escrow funds to the purchaser without notifying the commission or initiating any settlement procedures. Although not required by law, licensees are cautious that they may be exposing themselves to civil liability if they release the escrow funds without first getting the parties to agree as to whom it is entitled to the funds. Florida Realtor has developed pre-printed forms that can be used to obtain written permission of all parties to release escrow funds. It's called release and cancellation of contract. It is in the act file. Unfortunately, we do use it from time to time.
What do they mean by failure to satisfy terms of the financing clause? I mean, they couldn't get a mortgage?
Yeah.
Oh, so this happens pretty early on though, right?
No.
All right.
Before the
I just
closing,
gave
before the closing, that can happen.
No, the issue comes up, it's the big issue we're afraid of right at the end. Because all along, yeah, we're good, everything's going along great, and all of a sudden, some stupid underwriter decides that they want one more document. And when they get that document, they deny the loan. The contingency is almost a page long on the sales contract for financing. It is totally different than the previous version. Actually, in my mind, I feel it's easier to understand and follow than the previous version. But it's lengthy.
Can you give one example of the financing clause?
Well, in the contract, it says that the buyer has 30 days to obtain loan approval. If the buyer makes a diligent effort, which means providing everything that the underwriters or the lender request, and they are denied, if the buyer notifies the seller in writing prior to the end of the approval period, the buyer is entitled to get their money back and go home. And then it continues with other possibilities. But I'm not going to get that whole thing
If they don't agree.
now. If they don't agree, we've got another issue. Like I said, and in a lot of cases, I think why Greg is so successful is he makes it clear to them, here's what the law says. Now, anytime I talk about contracts, I realize things I need to do when I'm taking a listing. Like explaining the inspection period to a seller, explaining what happens if a buyer makes a diligent effort to obtain financing and is unable to. You don't really have the right to sit there and demand that money or any part thereof. The thing that you need to do is accept the fact that the contract is canceled and sign off and let them return the money to the buyer. That's kind of the approach that they take. Because what if and one way to handle those situations is put them in the other position. If you're talking to the buyer, put them into the seller's position. In this case, you're talking to the seller, put them in the position of being the buyer, and have to try done everything that you could to get the loan and weren't able to. And so you've already agreed that they get their money back because you signed the contract. That usually will get them to sign. But you have to understand that anytime that cancellation release is signed, the minute the buyer signs it and you send it to the other agent, deal's dead. It's canceled. What hasn't happened yet is permission to refund the money. Because if the seller hasn't signed it, buyer's still out of the contract. And if it's financing contingency or whatever it may be, they've gotten out legitimately, the cancellation and release does that. And if the seller will sign their part of it, then the buyer gets the money back. Or maybe you negotiate a 50-50 split.
That's how it is.
Or you can spend all the money on attorneys when you go to court. Which one would you rather do? So you have to realize that if you're not willing to accept some sort of negotiation, the next step is attorneys. Which means what? Tick-tock, tick-tock. So by the time you get it fixed, you're lucky if you break even. Not worth it. Now, if we're talking about $500,000, that's a different story. But talking about a $5,000 or a $10,000 deposit, which is nothing to sneeze at, but what's it gonna cost me in time, effort, fees that I'm gonna be charged to do this?
But, sorry, but as a seller, you can ask for a clause of pre-approved buyers.
Mm-hmm.
You can put that, right?
Yeah. You're not gonna have to, because when I'm working with a buyer, I always have a pre-approval letter and proof of funds that accompany my offer. Because buyer, we have to be able to show that's the seller that they can purchase your property. Because I'm gonna have a hard time negotiating a good deal for you if they don't have a clue who you are. They just want to know that they hear jingling when you talk. And enough of it to buy this property. Okay, moving along. Bottom of page 96. You got a little paragraph at the bottom of the page that talks about the attorneys and the title companies as escrow agents. It says if a title company or an attorney is the escrow agent, the broker has no obligation to report an escrow dispute to FREC or to institute settlement procedures. Generally, a title company or attorney will not disperse funds without authorization from the parties to the transaction. Usually, if the parties cannot come to an agreement regarding the funds, the matter is submitted to a court of law for resolution. And if they have money, I had a situation where they had $500 and the seller had disappeared off the face of the earth. They had trouble trying to get a hold of the buyer. The buyer said they still wanted to buy because they didn't understand that it had already been sold to somebody else. But they wanted to buy it. There was $500 in escrow. And they didn't sign off because they wanted to buy the property. So the seller had already signed off. But they weren't going to release the funds until the buyer did. Finally, they talked them into signing. So my question is, do you know what would happen if, let's say, the buyer never showed up to get the money? At some point, Greg would turn that money over to the state of Florida. There is a fund in the state where uncollected monies are placed.
Can the buyer request it later?
Yeah.
In that case.
Then he'd have to go to the state to ask for the $500. That would make sense.
Or dormant.
And they're like, because you've been keeping it here, I need $250.
Yeah. On 97, there's a little paragraph at the top. So, you know what? I hate driving buyers around.
Yeah.
Well, when we're showing property, probably.
Can I just tell them to meet you there?
So I don't have any control over them.
Oh, yeah, because they can like stop at Chick-fil-A or something.
Yeah. Or they can call you up and say, we've had enough today, bye. Can't do that, they're in my car. The other side of the coin is, they also, if they're not in my car, would have a hard time shooting.
Yeah.
And don't laugh.
Yeah, you can.
Every once in a while, you hear of a real estate agent getting killed because they're at a house that's what? Empty.
Can you keep it concealed on you?
One thing that I concern myself with the concealed permit is, it's not the permit I have a problem with, it's, you need to understand when you take that out of that holster,
No, you gotta use
you
it.
plan on using it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, yeah. I would only use it if I was in fear of my life. I'd fight you before I shot you.
You don't have to fight. I'm gonna charge you $500 to drive you around,
Oh, gosh.
and you're gonna, and I'll get a commission from the listing agent. And I charge that $250. Answer is no. Because if you don't find them something, you have to return it.
Part of your job.
Out of the deal.
That's why some you don't see. Sounds like a good idea. And it's not allowed, and furthermore, the company would not allow it, even if the law did. At the bottom of the page, take a look at that section that talks about rental information and lists. When I first came to Florida, these companies were all over the place. And they would charge you $40 to $100 to give you a list of available rentals in the area. And then you could take the list and check them out. This activity is the reason for the A in A bar sale. If you look at the first A, this activity is the reason for it. What happened is they started holding keys, they started showing property, which means they were doing what? Playing real estate agent. And there was no refunds on those lists. And they started finding out they were making up the list. They would have a picture of a building with an address. When you got to the address, there was no building there. So mom decided what? We're gonna have to put some clamps on this. This business was basically litigated out of business. If I walk in and I give you $100 for that list, and I can't find a suitable rental, if I come back in 30 days, am I entitled to a refund? The answer is yes. How much? 75%. So I'd be entitled to $5 up. How about this? I buy a list for $100. On the list, I find two communities that look really interesting. One of them extremely interested because they say that the electricity is included in the rent. So I call that one up first and find out what. No, we've never paid for electricity. You pay for your own. So you call the other one, and the other one sounded really nice. So you drove over, took a look at it, and said, okay, I'll take it. My question is, if I come back within 30 days, in that scenario, would I be entitled to a refund?
No.
The answer is yes, and 100%. It says if anything on that list is incorrect, I'm entitled to a 100% refund.
Oh.
It didn't say unless you found the property.
Okay, that's good.
I don't have a book, I guess.
Oh,
What?
I said I didn't have a book, I guess.
that's good to know.
Do they still do this with the list?
No.
No.
The lists are still there.
Yeah, Craigslist.
But think about the apartment books that you see on the stands. They're 50 to 60% advertising. That's how they make their money now, rather than charging the user, the potential tenant, a fee for having the book. They're selling advertising space in it. That's where they make the money. That's why I said they basically legislated this business out of it. It is one of the 8 services of real estate, but given the nature of that, what's the chances you keep those lists current? When you're talking about rentals? Slim and none. Which probably means I'm gonna be constantly giving back 100%. That should work out well. Even 75%. It's going to be a problem. So basically, the requirements of this caused that industry to go in a different direction. And instead of getting their money from potential tenants, they probably did better. That probably was a benefit to them. Because if they can sell that advertising space, they can make a lot of money. On the top of the next page, 98, in the gray box, it gives you a short synopsis of what we just looked at. But what I really want to look at is lines 1 through 5. It is a first-degree misdemeanor if you violate the law in regard to these rental lists, which is a fine up to $1,000, imprisonment up to 1 year. It is the only misdemeanor under 475. Just about a first-degree misdemeanor. Most others are second-degree misdemeanors.
Which one is the worst?
It's not a question of worse. By making the penalty stiffer than the others, by putting that requirement of that refund there, they wanted the legislature to eliminate the business altogether. But they wouldn't go that far. So they got enough wording in it where it didn't make any business sense to continue doing it. Because it's very hard to monitor. And that money that the tenant is paying is not escrow money. So it's not like they have to put that money aside, so it's there if they come back with a refund. Because they could say to the tenant that came back, I'm sorry, but I don't have your money, I've had to refund 10 today. How many day refund that day? Yes.
So I know that we have to talk generically because my question involves the state test exam on this. Does the state take into account, or FREC, more of the obscure business practices that due to changes and things are less relevant today than they were years ago? Or do they still put equal weight on some of these more obscure points? Not to mention anyone in particular.
Right. I understand. My answer is, depends. Because they have a bank of questions. Supposedly, those questions are chosen randomly. And they also classify questions from different areas. So that the test doesn't happen to be, most of the questions are there for 4 different chapters. They try to spread it out. These type of things have a tendency to come up as much as super important stuff. Now, here's the reason for that. You're less likely to remember this than you are the requirements of turning in escrow, because you're going to be doing that. The odds are you're never going to do what we just talked about. So a lot of times they want to see if you're aware of that. They may also be seeing if it's been tough.
I would just think that they would teach what's important and spend time on the things that will be relevant today and in the future.
They are. They absolutely are.
Okay.
It's called textbook. Those are all the important things. Every bit of that book is important. But that's why I'm giving you the stars. Because if all I was worried about was you passing the class test, I would just have you highlight those areas and go home every day. But anything in that book is fair game on that test. The likelihood of you using all of it is 0.
Yep.
But they don't know that. So they didn't want to give you a smidgen of everything, as much as they can in 100 questions, to see if you understand the law before they turn you loose on the public. So I think sometimes it's important to understand the thought process behind it. So, you know, technically I should have you highlight the whole book. Are there areas that they rarely ask about? Yes. But one time in my career, somebody asked me about some obscure thing we were talking about. Do you think that'll be on the test? I said, no, I seriously doubt it. It was their first question. And it was the first time I'd ever heard that question being on the test. So if you ask me if something's going to be on the test, my answer is always yes.
Well, that's why I asked generically, I was asking if there was less emphasis on obscure things from the past.
Generally speaking, yes. But that depends on the test. And if they're doing those questions randomly, and see what's also fun about the test and why you can't memorize the questions in the book, you have to understand why the answer is what it is because they have a question, but they may have 4 different sets of answers. And you've seen that in the book. The same basic question was asked you more than one time. Okay. Today is Wednesday. Okay, I guess that means Monday. Please put your chairs in, and I'll pass them out.
Oh my God.